All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the special meeting, City of Lakewood study session on September 12th, 2022 at 5:35 p.m. For those participating this evening via phone, that number is 720-707-2699 with the webinar ID of 838-1639-1820. You'll press pound twice to get into the meeting, and then we'll have an opportunity to speak by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. Just to check, there were 2 questions in the question box about sound. So just want to make sure that the folks that are tuning in via the webinar have sound now. Yep, looks like we're good to go. Thank you, Mr. McCord. Appreciate that. So we are good to go. I will just ask for the clerk to please call roll.
Paul.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Jansen.
Here.
Mayock Guerrero.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Strom.
Here.
Sharazai.
Here.
Springsteen. Stewart.
Here.
Olver.
Here.
Mayor Paul, you have a quorum.
Great. All right, so just a couple of clerical things before we start this meeting to let everybody know that this is a study session, that we also have a 7 o'clock p.m. meeting as well. And so after this study session is done, we'll actually log out. There's a different Zoom link to move into the regular meeting that we will go into. We certainly know that there is a lot of interest, and when we get to this portion, Mayor Pro Tem Vincent will make sure that she kind of talks a little bit about the comments that we've received on Lakewood Speaks, and we would encourage folks who have weighed in via Lakewood Speaks, as we have a tight night tonight, if you wouldn't mind leaving those as your written comments moving forward tonight. And so before we go into item 3, the presentation, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Hodson.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we enter into the main event of the evening, I'd like to introduce you to our newest Public Works Director. This is Max Kirschbaum. Max, I've asked him to come to the podium for 30 seconds so that he can just give you a little bit about his background. And now, when you interact with him, you now have a face to a name. So thanks, Max.
Welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to build on the success of my predecessor, Jay Hutchison, and his long and distinguished career with the city. I'm a professional engineer. I have 39 years of experience in various engineering and public works positions. Most of that was in the U.S. Air Force. I've also worked for El Paso County, and most recently I was a public works and utilities director for the city of Westminster. I've had the opportunity to meet a good number, if not most, of my department so far, and I can tell you that I'm very pleased to join a group of very hardworking, dedicated people who come to work every day to try to make this city a better place. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great. Well, thank you.
30 seconds.
That was it.
You didn't get a ding, so I think you did really good. Well, welcome. We're thrilled to have you, and look forward to working with you moving forward. All right. Will the clerk please read item 3?
Item 3, presentation, amending Title 5 of the Lakewood Municipal Code by adding a new chapter 5.55 regarding licensing of short-term rentals in the city of Lakewood, Colorado.
Great. All right. And as Mr. Smith is preparing, I will just mention that this again is a study session. This was born out of many discussions amongst the Housing Policy Committee. Whatever happens tonight will then move forward into a first and second reading. Mr. Smith.
Thank you so much, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you for taking a few moments of this study session agenda to take a look at the short-term rental concerns and issues and whatnot. We have an ordinance here, a draft ordinance that'll come before you. Normally, I'm here as the Economic Development Director or as the Executive Director of the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority. Tonight, I'm here with one of my other duties, which is to facilitate or to liaison, if you will, with the Housing Policy Commission. And just as a reminder for folks folks. The Housing Policy Commission is made up of 6 members of City Council, 1 representative from each of the wards, and then the mayor as well. And so I've had the good fortune of working with the HPC for quite some time. That's HPC is what we often refer to the Housing Policy Commission as. And so had lots of opportunities to have conversations about the short-term rental issue and concern. At virtually all of those meetings, there was an ability for public comment. So we've generated public comment over the course of months and years about these particular issues, done a lot of research and worked our way through it. To that end, we've developed a draft ordinance, if you will, to take a look at and see if it makes some sense, trying to balance both the needs of folks that want to do short-term rentals and the needs of the community for the things that they're concerned about with short-term rentals in their neighborhood. So without further ado, I'll just jump right into the presentation here. First of all, to make sure everyone's aware, the current status of short-term rentals in Lakewood. Short-term rentals are those of residential properties that are 29 or fewer days in length. If you are renting 30 days or a more typical sort of a lease over the course of 6 months or a year, those are long-term leases, and those aren't affected by the short-term rental concerns. Currently, the SDRs are not allowed under the Lakewood Municipal Code. There's no licensure. There's no ability to get a license to maintain a short-term rental. The increased availability of the short-term rental platforms such as Airbnb and VVRO and others have made it really easy for property owners to utilize their residential properties for short-term rentals. Property owners within the city have requested the city allow residential properties to be used as short-term rentals. To be comprehensive, there have also been folks that have requested that they not be allowed in the city as well. And so, again, that Housing Policy Commission has been trying to balance those two different thought processes. As short-term rentals are a form of a lodging business, the city has to establish business regulations for the safety of all involved, including the neighboring properties. And so once again, I'll just remind you that the Housing Policy Commission, the HPC, 6 members, 1 from each ward, and the mayor. This is a draft document that includes many recommendations within the context of the document. So recognize that this is the product of the Housing Policy Commission and the work through this process. So just a couple of highlights on here. We've identified this ordinance as 2022-XX. The X's are to hold that place number because we don't have a number at it right at this point. So in order to do it, you need a license to operate a short-term rental. And you must obtain an annual operating license, and you have to post that license on all the advertisements as well as within the STR, so that we know that it's a licensed short-term rental. The fees have to be established by a separate resolution. Those aren't in the ordinance right now. Those will be established, obviously, by a separate resolution, and so those are to be determined. The enforcement provisions provide ample grounds for revocation, suspension, and non-renewal. So there's really an opportunity to make certain that folks that are operating short-term rentals, if this were to go through, if those folks are maintaining great operations there and good for the neighborhood and good for their own uses. Mandatory mediation with the community members that are harmed by STR activities are also included in this draft ordinance that you've seen up on Lakewood Speaks. So the applicants have to provide or obtain all of the following things in advance of the application approval. And so you have to inform members of the community 250 feet from the property line. So all the neighbors need to know that you're applying for a short-term rental license. You have to provide proof of insurance, and that's not just homeowners insurance. It's an insurance that indicates that you have the ability to run this kind of an operation, and you're insured for all of the things that can go wrong with that particular operation. So it's a little bit more sophisticated proof of insurance for this application. You have to have the property safety inspected on an annual basis. So that's just to make certain that the the smoke detectors are in good working order, and that there's no particular things that are not particularly safe about that environment. Parking plan, you have to have a parking plan. One of the comments that we get fairly frequently is that short-term rentals create some level of parking distress in neighborhoods. So you have to have a parking plan so that parking the cars doesn't disturb the rest of the neighbors. Proof of ownership of the property that you're renting, that has to be provided as part of the application. You have to get a city sales and use tax license so that you can collect on behalf of the city sales and use tax and remit those things as part of the operation. This would all be part of the application for a short-term rental license. You also have to get a city hotel motel accommodations tax license. We have a tax for lodging properties here in the city of Lakewood, so you'd have to get that one there, collect that on behalf of the city, and then remit that to the city. A little bit more on it. Primary residence. This is one of the requirements that's in the draft document. The length of the owner within the STR during the 12-month period was not determined. Rather, the STR must be the primary residence of the owner, and it may only be used for short-term rentals 180 days annually. That's what's in this draft document. This encourages the owner to be on the premises or near the premises when the property is being rented, but it doesn't mandate it. There is no mandatory distance between licensed STRs. You may recall that in some previous versions of this issue, there was some thought about distances between STRs. In this particular one, there's no mandatory distance. The maximum number of days the property can be used for short-term rentals, 180 days total per calendar year. And the date on which enforcement of the new STR code shall commence, staff's recommending January 1st, 2023. That's predicated on the fact that we have an ordinance on the books sometime around the end of October. We need 60 to 90 days to kind of rev up and get ready for accepting those applications, looking at those applications, approving those applications, and making sure that all the materials that go out, the documents, the brochures, all of those sorts of things are all up and in good working order. That can't happen overnight. So if we wind up passing an ordinance or getting one on the books on January 31st, 2022, we're not going to be ready on January 1st, 2023. That's an expectation that we should build into this process. But right now, if we were to get one on the books at the end of October, we think we could be ready in January for that process. So what are the next steps for STRs? One is to schedule an ordinance, and that's 2022-XS. We give it a number, and we do a first and second reading, as we do with all ordinances. And of course, there would be additional opportunities for public comments at those meetings as well. We develop the documents, materials, and forms for the short-term rental program. When we know what's in the ordinance, we can make certain that all of the materials reflect what's in the ordinance. And then that are established in that program. Then we prepare amendments to the city's zoning ordinance to establish STRs as a defined use in certain zone districts, and those are residential zone districts. And we would obtain planning commission recommendations for those amendments and bring those amendments to city council for approval. So all of these things are next steps if we are to move forward with this. Some other considerations in here was we need to train the staff to support the STR regulations. These were to be done out of the city clerk's office, as other licenses are. And right now, we don't have folks that are specifically designed to work with short-term rental license applications. So we need to train folks on what all of the rules, regs, and how to do the application successfully. We'd have to hire new staff if necessary. We don't think that there's a place in the staff. There's a process for hiring new staff. So we're not anticipating that right now, but we may need to hire some folks temporarily. We believe that at the beginning of this process, there's going to be a lot of activity, lots of folks trying to get short-term rental licenses. Once the program is up and running, it'll be a little bit smoother. As people are reapplying for those applications, it'll be less like 100 or 200 applications in one day that we're trying to process as quickly as possible. It'll be on a more even basis. There are third-party vendors out in the world that help with this kinds of process. They help us monitor those kinds of things. Do we hire one of those? Do we put out an RFP and get somebody to help us with those processes? We've talked to a number of them, and all of them offer varying degrees of service in terms of helping us out there. None of them are a turnkey sort of operation. So we can't just hire a third-party vendor and then, kind of sit and watch the whole thing happen. We're still going to have to be engaged and involved with it, even as third-party vendors help us maintain the data and reach out to folks doing short-term rentals and so on and so forth. So some additional considerations. This is one that came in late as we were preparing for this study session. On the 22nd of August, just a couple of weeks ago, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down a New Orleans STR ordinance requirement that only allowed STRs that are license holders' primary residence. The court found that this requirement violates the Dormant Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The Chapter 5.5 short-term licensing code that we've got a draft for you in front of you contains virtually that same residency requirement as the Fifth Circuit just struck down. The Fifth Circuit's decisions are not controlling on Colorado or Lakewood, but it's likely that every state will now see challenges to that STR ordinances with the residency requirements. The reason we have those residency requirements is to help prevent investors from coming up and buying a lot of housing in our community and then turning around and renting it. That's the primary reason that the residential requirement is in this draft ordinance. So there's a couple of ways to get the same sort of effect without requiring the residency. And we named a couple in here that we talked about real quickly. With guidance from the council, we can change the residency requirement to accomplish many of those same goals I just mentioned. One option is to limit STR licenses to one per person or per company, so that you don't have folks that are buying 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 houses in the community and then doing short-term rentals with them. The second is a more restrictive option, but it is to require that a person or company operates an STR in Lakewood, that they don't operate one in other jurisdictions. And we do that through an affidavit that says essentially, I'm not operating them, this is my helm here, and I'm working through that. So those are some ways that we could still achieve some of those same goals of not having investors buy up housing properties in our community and making housing tougher for folks that want to use housing in our community. So with that, I will wrap up the presentation of the draft amendment, or draft ordinance for you, and certainly open it up to questions and discussions. As I mentioned, the short-term the Housing Policy Commission is made up of counselors who are here today that can certainly answer a lot of the questions about policy sorts of things. We also, of course, have our crack legal team behind me here that can answer some of those legal questions as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have with those. I will point out before I turn it back over to the dais here that we had about 30 comments on Lakewood Speaks on this particular issue, and those comments varied in different kinds of things. One of the things that this issue tends to do is bring out folks that actually do a lot of commenting. They do very thoughtful, lengthy sorts of notes and whatnot for all of these kinds of things. So hope everyone had a chance to read those because they are rather thought-provoking. And with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor, and we'll go from there. I will sit down, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
You bet.
And, this process has gone on for some time, and so I want to just acknowledge our previous chair of the Housing Policy Committee, which was Councilor Franks, and would like to now turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Vincent, who is the current chair, and to shape it a little bit more. And I guess what I'd like to try to gauge from this conversation is, moving forward, if we can have consensus on any changes that we want to discuss tonight, that would be great. But also keep in mind that if there isn't consensus, you also have that opportunity on second reading to make amendments. So if you are thinking about potential amendments that you would like to make that don't gain consensus tonight, it would be great to maybe have legal hear those, and then we can make sure that those are prepared so we're not trying to do that on the fly come second reading. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
All right. Thank you, Mayor. This has been a long process. I think it's been 2.5 to 3 years. And we have tried very hard through all of this to listen to the comments that the public has had. We've had good interaction, I think, at all of our meetings from that, and to try to address that. We did have a lot of comments, and so that we don't have a lot of redundancy, so if people are here to speak, they can, but I want everybody to know that these were captured. So I kind of broke everything apart, and I came down with 32 comments. The number one is we had 18 that questioned the 180-day restriction in that. Needing the income had almost 10 comments specifically to that. Let us have more than 180 days, we need the income. The primary residence, about 7 comments were against that you can only do it on your primary residence and not have another one. Over-regulation, some people felt that this was over-regulated. That was approximately 9 comments. And the licensure followed up with that, but there were 2 specific to that. And then 2 just flat out said, no, we don't want them. We got another couple comments after that, so that's not reflected in here. I think they came in after 5 o'clock. So If anybody had any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you very much for that quick synopsis. So I want to move into questions, and I'd like to start with a question or two or a comment, and then, there's a lot of lights up here on the board for this, so it would be great if we could start with a question or two or a comment, get through everybody, and then take a quick check where we're at on consensus moving forward on anything in particular.
May I say something?
Yes, please.
Just, it would help, I think, maybe members of the committee and others, if you have a question, if you could say page 1, comment Q, that would help everybody get on board then, and we can maybe move through it instead of flipping back and forth through things. So, thank you.
Okay, so I have Counselor Franks to start, and then I'll go from there.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. As has been already shared, it has been a long process. We certainly appreciate everyone coming out, and also to our legal department for analyzing sort of the recent ruling. And while it doesn't apply directly, certainly it is information that we needed. I guess the 2 points that I really want to explore is, as we're talking about this, as Councilor Vincent mentioned, we have folks for whom the income that's being generated, and again, we know they're not currently legal in Lakewood, but the income that's being generated is in many cases keeping folks in our community afloat. But we also have folks in our community who are concerned about, again, the investor situation or just neighborhood character changing. And so the area that I want to explore is to make sure the enforcement piece, and I know that's covered, obviously in there, but we have STRs that have been identified, self-identified by the person running them, and the neighbors didn't know. They were being such good stewards of the property. They were being good stewards of, renting it out in a real responsible way. And yet we've also had the flip side of that, where there are really egregious situations and people's lives are impacted. And so I just want to, sort of get staff to sort of weigh in on those mechanisms that will be there in addition to the notification, if that holds up, where people will be able to have that level of recourse to know that their own enjoyment of their home won't be impacted. So it's really not really a specific question, but more of a sort of how would this all work to make sure the community can kind of see that vision as it's written today, and then they can weigh in if they feel like there's some improvements or changes that should be made.
Great. Thank you. Looks like,
Yeah, there are a number of enforcement mechanisms already built into the ordinance, and we believe that they are appropriate. And I believe one of the counselors indicated kind of too hot, too cold, sort of an arrangement in there. But they are there so that typically what happens with short-term rentals is there are really two kinds of things that come forward. There are noise complaints, and those come up on a regular basis, and then there's also parking situations that create difficulties in the neighborhood. Both of those are controlled by the code enforcement division, and then of course ultimately by the police department if necessary. And the idea is that if those violations come to a certain level, and maybe the legal folks can remind me to make sure I'm getting it correct, but I believe it's 2 in the same year, and those 2 in the same year can put your licensure in jeopardy at that point. There can be a revocation. There are processes for making certain that you have the right to talk about your licensure and that sort of a thing. But ultimately, if it turns out you're a bad neighbor in terms of running your STR in such a way that there's negative impacts on the neighborhood, that process that's in place in the ordinance right now, we believe to be an appropriate response to what those infractions on a regular basis. So kind of balancing both those issues. So it's not a one strike and you're out, it's a couple of strikes, and it's an opportunity to understand what's going on. And part of that could be just that education piece of it, because we haven't allowed these, they haven't been lawful in the city of Lakewood yet. Maybe folks aren't aware of the fact that they have an impact on their neighbors, and letting them know that they do would be helpful in terms of mitigating those difficulties.
Well, just to pick up a little bit on that, so obviously, I want to make sure the community is aware that a complaint would need to be investigated. It wouldn't just be that you could, have a complaint and then not have that substantiated. But I think where I'm hearing a lot of community concern is that maybe code enforcement is not presently appropriately staffed for taking on something like this, considering I think we have close to 500 that are currently operating, at least showing up on our. So I wanted to, obviously ask that point if we feel that we are either currently or would be appropriately staffed to be able to address that.
Looks like Mr. Skank is going to jump in, and good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's tough to say whether code enforcement as currently staffed is up to the task, but I certainly think to start off, we would be in a good place. What I really liked about this ordinance is it mirrors a lot of the enforcement capabilities that we have through our lodging license program, which you're going to hear an update on here in a little bit. And we've had a lot of success with that. There are a number of ways that people can find themselves in a hearing. And the beautiful thing about a hearing is, yes, we get to say, these are the allegations against you. You get to have the neighborhoods be there as witnesses, but you also have the opportunity to defend yourself. And so if somebody's making claims that aren't substantiated, that'll come out. So the way it would work is we would get a complaint that would come into code enforcement. Likely myself or somebody else in the city attorney's office would help look into that complaint, determine if it's something that we should go to hearing on. And as you said, a lot of these you don't even know they're operating. So I know that code enforcement gets complaints on them, but it's not as though they're overwhelmed with those complaints right now. So I think that we would be in a good place to have it with our current staffing. That said, if all of a sudden there's just been a ton of people who have been saying, I didn't know it was legal to do STRs in Lakewood and now I want to, we may have to adjust accordingly. But I do think that code enforcement is up to the task as of right now, just especially seeing the number of complaints that we come in directly related to the operation of short-term rentals.
Thank you. And I just want to conclude with this portion by saying I really want to, the city attorney's office, we have been at this for a while. They have fielded dozens upon dozens of all of our very detailed questions. Many of us use Google extensively to really see what was going on around the country. And I just really want to acknowledge all of the hard work, good direction, and really being able to leverage our current code and not reinvent any parts of it. I think that was a real turning point for me as we started down one path maybe a year or so ago, maybe even 2 years ago, and then really the city attorney's office saw a new vision and saw a way for us to leverage current infrastructure. So I would just be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all that hard work.
Okay, thank you. So I tried to do this in the order that these came on. I have Ms. Sherazai, Stewart, Jansen, Mr. Abel, Ms. Matt Guerrero, and Mr. Olver.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm thankful I'm going after Councilor Franks because I Googled something and I wanted to share it with you. So, so a lot of the comments that were coming in online, as Councilor Vincent discussed, how they, there was some pushback on the primary residence, and there was a lot of folks referring us to what's going on in Wheat Ridge. And so when I looked that up, it looks like their short-term rental ordinances around whole house and partial house. So that allows for those two entities to exist. And I would just wonder, and I guess my question is, would we have an appetite to, there was 2 suggestions you made, Mr. Smith, but could we consider that as well? I think that we're seeing how that, and our neighbors to the north is helping strike a balance between welcoming guests, regulating hosts, and protecting our neighborhood's character, which I think ultimately is what we're trying to do, while understanding that we're hearing from folks that desire this to drive income in their homes. And so that's really my question. And thank you, Google.
So was there anybody that wished to weigh in on that, or is there an educational piece maybe that you want to enlighten maybe the rest of us as to?
Well, I mean, that's the premise of the sort of regulations around how I'm assuming that they started somewhere around primary residence and realized that that's restrictive. We saw Ms. Guy share that information with us in the community, so we know that there's some illegality to enforcing that. And I do think that there's a little bit of elitism in that approach and sort of demanding that people use this that are only their primary residence. That being said, I've been to Santa Fe. I don't want our community to turn into that as well. And so I guess I would love to see maybe more information from staff, perhaps on, would this be approach that we would be able to consider here to meet this requirement? Understanding and sort of reinforcing what Councilor Franks has shared, there are community members who do have some concern that we would lose the quality of our neighborhoods to investors coming in. I just would ask us to consider, do we need to reinvent the wheel when there seems to be a structure in place with a neighboring city that's sort of solved for this already?
So thank you. So I think we'll come back maybe for consensus on that piece, if that's cool. Okay. Ms. Stewart?
Thank you. With regards to the previous comment, if we are gathering consensus, I just want to clarify that that would be something that I would be interested in looking at as well. I think it kind of solves for some of the issues that that I and some in the community are seeing with this draft ordinance, which is, I think that we are able to strike a balance between keeping the character of our neighborhoods and ensuring that Airbnb does not become a kind of developer gold mine. That I don't want that either. However, I also understand that Lakewood is becoming increasingly unaffordable. Airbnb just put out some stats that nearly 20% of their hosts across the country identify as or live with an educator. I think that's really significant. We're a community who wants teachers to be able to live in our city. And if they're supplementing their income by renting out a room or a basement in their house, I have a real issue with us limiting their ability to stay in our community. So I guess I'll just go down the list of the things I'd like to see so that people can note them for consensus purposes and just be very clear. I would like to strike the 180 days. I think it's arbitrary, and I think it limits people's ability to rent out a room in their own home. I think it's overly onerous, especially if we're talking about a primary residence where the owner is there and monitoring and has a guest in their home. Secondly, I would be interested in something that Councilor Sharazai pointed out, which is to either separate the limits on licenses between primary residences and non-primary residences, kind of what she was alluding to with partial house or whole house. I think that's a different way of saying the same thing. I think that we can strike the balance by not becoming a haven for developers by, if we do allow whole house rentals, let's set a limit on the amount of licenses that the city gives out and just cap it. That would seem to solve the issue. If we are unwilling to do that, then I would really like us to look at grandfathering in existing whole house Airbnbs. That is something that Breckenridge did, just to, again, we got some comments from people who say this is already a source of income. So if we don't want to expand licenses and offer a limited amount of secondary licenses to humans who are not living full-time in their home, then perhaps we need to look at grandfathering in the ones that exist already in our city, as well as eliminating the single contract at a time. I think that if you have 2 rooms to rent out and you want to have 2 guests in your home, you ought to be able to. And I think it would be interesting to expand the parking definition as well, as some places have street parking, and that is a fine and legitimate way for people to park. So those are the things
Okay.
that I'd like to see. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm keeping track. Ms. Jansen?
Thank you. So my question is on page 2, under 5.5.010 definitions, on the calls for service. And so I was thinking, I was reading this, and I'm like, well, what if something happens to the rentee? Say the rentee is there and somebody breaks into the car. They have to call the police to come and is that going to count? Or can we put an exclude or a number 3, if something happens to the rentee, that's not counted as a strike.
So I certainly, and this might even lend itself to what we're going to talk about at our next meeting, which is some of the modifications we're making to the hotel motel ordinance. And I would imagine if it is legal that there could be different language put in there for that.
There could certainly be a different language put in there to carve out exactly what Councilmember Jansen was asking for, be a policy decision, and if that's the way council wants to go, we can certainly make that work.
Okay, thank you.
And I wrote that down so we can come back to it.
And thank you, Rebecca. Our Councilor Storr, the strike, the 180 days, I am with you on that. And also, I'd like some interest in on that whole house, partial house also. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Abel.
Thank you. I have a number of things. I'll go through a couple or a few, and then hopefully someone else will ask some of the questions I had. Enforcement and taxes. The tax money is hospitality tax, and that goes to ED. Is that economic development? Is that correct? Is that correct?
That is correct. The lodging tax does go to the economic development.
But all our enforcement mechanism will come out of the capital budget, the general fund. Is that correct? I'm sorry, not capital, but the general fund. Is that correct?
As I understand it, the way the ordinance is put together, yes.
So we're going to have a gap in funding the calls for service and other similar things. That's going to come from the general fund, but all of the largesse is going into economic development. That kind of concerns me. But I think to fix it, we would have to restructure our ED, our hotel tax wording. Is that correct? I'm asking our attorney.
You want me to try to answer that? Or? Sure. Yeah, the bottom line is yes, you've identified something that probably needs to be rectified in some circumstance in there. There would be the cost of the licensure or the license fee in order to get your license and that sort of thing. And the goal behind that is to try to make that cover the licensing portion of it. So the enforcement portion of it hasn't been hasn't been addressed at this point. The lodging tax is something that would happen, that would go into the economic development fund, but is there an ability to move those dollars around to make the enforcement happen? The short answer is yes, there's a way to do it, but there's not a mechanism right now today that I can say that's how we would go about it.
I'd like to look into that, and if we can use it to fund more code enforcement officers, if we find we need them, that would be very handy. Thank you. Instead of whole house, part of the house, or other things I don't think we can actually come out and say our goal is to limit the amount of investors who can take advantage of this. But would it be, this is for the attorney, would it be acceptable for us to say that the owner must be present whenever these units are rented? That way you don't borrow investors directly. But you would make sure that the owner would be there, and if that's a burden that's difficult for somebody in California who wants to buy a house in Colorado or in Lakewood to rent out for an STR, he would just have to, or they would just have to come out here and stay for whatever the rental period is. Could we do that in view of the Fifth Circuit ruling?
The Fifth Circuit ruling.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I was the one assigned to this from my
Yeah.
office. So the Fifth Circuit ruling is close to touching on that, but not quite, and you can't really take a court ruling beyond what's exactly said in there. There are a number of other jurisdictions that do limit to having a person be staying on the premises while they're renting out, and you hit on the exact reason that wouldn't violate the Commerce Clause, and that's because it doesn't violate between in-state and out-of-state owners. You could hop on a plane and come stay in the house while there are people there. Would it make it exceedingly difficult? Yes, but it wouldn't be a per se violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause.
I think discouragement might be the key to this conundrum. When we were first discussing this with the other council, one of the reasons we kicked it back for more work was that the notice area of 350 feet wasn't felt to be sufficient, and now there is no notice area. So we could have a whole block of folks that have beds and breakfasts, and that would seem to me to...
It's 250 feet.
Oh, 250, I'm sorry, okay. Thank you. The other thing I'd like to bring up right now is it's a home business, no matter how you look at it. We don't have it classified as a home business. Would that be one of the things we would be adding when we tackle the planning and zoning portion of this issue?
That certainly could be a consideration to be added. I think if you add the use of short-term rental, you could add it as a use that is a home business and kind of two birds with one stone thing. But yes, that's a good suggestion.
Sure. I think that would make folks who sell insurance or jewelry out of their house feel a little better that this entrepreneur's project also would be a home business. Thank you. I'll hold on to a few things, and hopefully someone else will ask.
Okay, thank you. So I have Ms. Magarero, then I have Mr. Olver, Ms. Strom, then Ms. Vincent, then we'll go into round two. I'll do a quick check on some of these that we've been keeping track of.
Great. I have a question, which I think is just about, context. We're just hearing about Wheat Ridge, which is a neighboring city which has SCR policies. And I know that in the comments, Denver short-term rental policies were alluded to without being very specific. And so I came away really with a more broad question, which is how does this compare to our neighboring cities? Lakewood is not it's just not Vail, right? We're just not Vail. We have affordable housing issues for sure, but the primary driver of that in Lakewood is not tourism, right? If anything, we're working really hard to figure out how to better attract people from out of town into Lakewood to stimulate our local economy, right? That's the West Colfax Arts District. We're having those types of conversations on Alameda, in the new downtown Lakewood, which formerly was Belmar. And so some of the concerns that I hear that are the short-term rentals are a little bit like the boogeyman, and we have to figure out how to discourage all of these types of investments, recognizing that some of that is real, but some of that is again, we're just not Vail. So how does this compare to Wheat Ridge, Arvada, Denver, Golden? Is it similar amounts of fees and taxes? I think is a big question. Are people limited in having one license or something of that nature in that same that same train of thought? And then I think on code enforcement in terms of inspection and making sure that people have everything up to code, which they just have to have, I believe, for most of the online short-term rental facilities. Are most cities doing that level of enforcement and codification? Is that typical?
As the Housing Policy Commission has been working their way through these things, there's always been a look to the next community over, the one to the left or to the right, and that sort of thing, taking the ideas from those areas and trying to incorporate them into what Lakewood would want to do. There's new folks coming, or I should say new communities coming online all of the time. So at one point, the Colorado Municipal League had a table, and I think it had about 32 communities in Colorado, and we looked at some of those. I should say the commission looked at some of those, and like you said, a lot of the things that were Vail or Aspen or those kinds of things were set aside as those aren't what's important for Lakewood. We did look at Denver. We've looked at a number of communities all throughout the United States, and so the idea that the draft ordinance that's in front of the council at this point is incorporating most of those ideas, or the ideas that we wanted to take from other entities and whatnot. Now, I'm not certain when Wheat Ridges came into play here and how I can't specifically say how much we looked at that particular one, but we have looked at numbers of them, and that's how we got to where we are now. I think the goal has always been to try to take the best of what other folks are doing and to make it work for the city of Lakewood and our particular unique needs.
Great, thank you so much. And I assume that others who were on that, part of those conversations might have additional pieces to add to that. And then my other, I want to revisit something that Councilor Jansen said in the definitions about what a call counts as, because it's actually defined sort of differently. Like within definitions, I think that has the broadest definition of what a call or nuisance would count for, and it reads very, very broad. I think Councilor Jansen brings up a great point that if somebody who is the renter is the victim of a crime, that also would count in that definition reading. Although then later, there's like a different definition, I think on page 5, or not definition, but a different requirement for renewal on page 5 that has notifications of nuisances and like that section, which has different words than in the definition section. And then I think that there's one more place where it is in the the new license and then the renewal license, and then the like inspections and appeals also have, or the revocation, sorry, on page 8, at the bottom of page 8, has then like a different, or the top of page 9, has like, again, a different way of talking about calls and nuisances. And I want to say that I can't remember all of the details of exactly what piece of legislation it was on, but several years ago, the state had to deal with something along those lines that was about long-term rentals, like regular apartments and rented housing, where there was basically people were not reporting issues like domestic violence in their own homes because they knew that if they basically had emergency services come to their house too many times, then they could be evicted, and that used to be a state law, and that's no longer the case. You're now protected. And so the way that it reads to me, that really brings me so much concern that both the renter, but also then the person who lives there, right? So if you're gone, or it's one room in your house, and then in your life there's an emergency, or in your life there's some type of like violence or crime against you, as the homeowner, you also will know, like, I'm calculating between either having to go through this appeals process at the city or having the police come now. And that really, really gives me concern and heartburn. And then I would say in general, I think that 2 nuisance calls, no matter how you're defining it, is too low. It depends so much. We know that we saw with COVID, right, a lot more neighbor-to-neighbor conflict, most of which was not actually ending up being a violation of the law, and it was about people being home and stressed out 24 hours a day instead of the usual comings and goings, right? So we really saw that big change, which is why we now have a neighborhood program, right? Then we're working on avenues outside of policing to like address and mediate for that conflict. But it just seems to me that with just 2 nuisance calls, unless it's defined really much more specifically, that feels like a little bit arbitrary and like a pretty low bar, just depending on who your neighbor is. Like if they just already hated that you have a loud dog, you are going to have a real problem if you end up with a short-term rental, even if nothing's really going wrong, right? And so I think there needs to be a little bit more clear definition and then process on both those sides.
Great, thank you. Mr. Olver?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Oh, I got to echo the exact same thing. I have it flagged too. The nuisance thing is a bit too restrictive. It's defining calls for service as any time a law enforcement representative is being dispatched. And code enforcement is law enforcement, right? Because our code enforcement fall under our police department. So to code enforcement people goes out, whether it's for trimming bushes or windows or clearing the sidewalk. That would add up, and it could be used against somebody, and they really haven't done anything wrong. So that's definitely one of the things I flagged here too. But backing up in full disclosure, I used to have a condo in Frisco, and I rented it out using VRBO. That was long enough ago that there weren't any rules. But again, echoing, we're not Vail, we're not Dillon, we're not Frisco. I see it in short-term rental laws being talked about in their newspapers all the time, and they're being very restrictive, and we don't need to be that restrictive, I don't believe. But I would like to ask the city attorney about something. As long as we're in definitions, do we have like a list of definitions that we use for all our different ordinances? And I ask that because we were just looking at the campaign finance, looking at some of the campaign finance ordinances, and person there was defined as anything, really. It was real natural person and corporations and unions and organizations and everything under the sun. And I don't actually see persons defined here, but I do see owners being defined as any person, so I think we almost have to have a person defined. So are we getting into trouble with our definitions by having certain definitions in one ordinance and a different definition or in a different ordinance?
It's a good question. Short answer is no, we wouldn't get in trouble for that. The definitions for each chapter are only for that chapter. So, I can't go and say that the definition of person in the campaign finance laws has been violated in our short-term rental law. That's not the definition here. It's just for this chapter. And so that's why you specifically choose the words you want defined in the chapter here, and they don't bleed over into the others.
Doesn't that confuse our normal people? I mean, and everybody on this dais. But yeah, that was actually one of the problems in our committee meeting, was somebody got in trouble because they hadn't read, or they didn't understand would be a better way of saying it. And here we're talking about an ordinance that a lot of our citizens are going to be reading, and I don't want them having the idea that person or whatever means one thing and then means something else because of this. Like, you know what I mean? I worry that we're being a little too lackadaisical in our definitions. That's my opinion. It's up to the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. So, but moving along, yeah, there's definitely a couple of things I'd add, details. The 180 days, I would take that out. I don't know why. Oh, the primary residence. That, we should definitely be taking that out right now, because if one court throws it out, the rest of the courts are, unless it gets overturned on appeal, the rest of the courts are going to throw it out. And why should we put something in the law right now that we're going to force some of our citizens to sue us down the road to get forced out, which we know is going to get forced out? So I'm thinking right now we take out primary residence and proceed from there. It looks like, that's the road we're going down. We don't have anything to do about it, can't do anything about it. I would have more than one license. I'm okay with all jurisdictions. I'm not really worried that somebody in Lakewood is going to have another place in Wheat Ridge. But here's the big one. Well, wait a second, let's see if I have anything else on definitions. Nothing that's important. But here's the big one. I do favor a tiered approach, like we were talking about with Wheat Ridge. Two tiers, it sounds like. We saw examples from Austin, Texas, where there's 3 tiers. The way I've been looking at this coming up for a very long time is I think of scenarios. I like to think of the base scenario would be someone like my aunt, if I had one, that's still around, who needs the money to stay in her house. Elderly, doesn't necessarily have to be elderly, but somebody that needs a little bit of money to stay in their house, and they want to rent their place out short term, like over Christmas or over Easter or over Thanksgiving. They might even go somewhere, move in with their kids for a week, rent their house out at prime time, basically, high rent time, but they don't do it much at all. And so I'm calling that level 0. And I would just as soon leave them alone completely. no fees, no taxes, nobody comes, no licensing. We might not be able to treat people differently, and you can answer that in a minute. But I would leave the people that rent something out for, say, under 30 days in a year completely alone. And okay, the primary residence problem we have to get rid of, but I'm calling it owner-occupied. So, so there might be problems with definitions on that one. The level one that I'm thinking of is somebody has one or two houses or rooms that they're letting out, and there we have a different tier of fees and everything else, and there could be a level two, and then level three is more or less the investor people, and I define them as if they have an employee, and we might have to come up with a different definition if we want to adopt this idea. But that, if somebody has an employee, they're in the business of doing this. And I see a huge distinction between just a homeowner trying to add more money to their purse and somebody that's business is doing short-term rentals. So with the business, like level three, I'm calling it, yeah, sure, hit them with all the fees, all the inspections, everything else that we're talking about now. But the other people, like, cut them a break and let's not hassle them all that much. I'm not sure we can do that, but that's where I would go. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Oh, I have one last one. Do we know how far 250 feet is? Could anybody? Is that like 3 houses? Is it 2 houses? Is it 5 houses? Is it a whole block?
Well,
is it one house?
I mean, it would certainly depend upon the lot size. I mean,
right, but I don't want.
We utilize these sorts of measurements for a lot of different applications throughout. There's a standard definition of how you figure out where your radius is.
But I don't want people having to go out with a tape measure and going, okay. I mean, the language would be more interesting if it just said neighbors. And then everybody understands what the word neighbors means, and 250 feet might be a simplification.
Okay. Ms. Strom.
Thank you. I'll hit quickly the points that have already been made that I would echo. For one, removing the 180 days per year, removing the residency requirement, or primary residency requirement, and considering looking at limiting the number of licenses in Lakewood. Arvada, for example, allows 3, minimum of 2. And I really do appreciate the idea, and actually I should back up. I want to just extend appreciation and gratitude for all of our community members that took the time to put together so many thoughtful responses that gave us some of these ideas, especially those of you that actually operate in this capacity right now. We're up here trying to make decisions on things that we don't always know everything about. And for you reaching out, and especially so many of you reaching out with so many different ideas, thank you for helping us craft what we're trying to put together here. But also breaking up, the idea of breaking up this into categories where we've got, as Councilor Sherazai said, whole house, partial house, owner-occupied, not owner-occupied, I think makes absolute sense. So those are the ones we've already hit on. Some of my others were, I'm curious about with the license renewal and the inspection requirement, every year seems like we're in a, what's the gerbil thing, where we're just constantly redoing inspections, and are other municipalities doing inspections every year? Is that an every other year? I think that would behoove the city to look at from a human resources standpoint, but also making sure that this isn't too much of a barrier for those that are doing this, that especially for those that are owner-occupied. Is that really necessary every single year? A requirement for sales tax licenses, I do think needs to be considered also. Some of these platforms, Airbnb most specifically that I know of, do remit sales tax themselves, so I don't know that the property owner actually needs that. So I think that needs to be looked at. If, back to the whole doing this in two different categories, owner occupied or not, if it's not owner occupied, I think there needs to be a requirement in here somewhere that there needs to be contact information for someone that is available 24/7. And then I just had concerns about January 1 being a launch time. I think that there's a lot going on here, and I understand we've given 90 days, but I also want to be, what? Yeah, January 1. Yeah. I don't know that if that's enough time, so I would almost say we do something like March. I don't know. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Ms. Vincent, you want to close out our first round here?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Maybe a little education. We had two ordinances that we were looking at with a lot of pushback from the community. One was owner-occupied, and the other was non-owner-occupied. And it was kind of looked at and agreed to that we would focus on the owner-occupied based on a lot of feedback that we got from neighbors who had VRBOs next to them. So I don't care, the committee's going to have to go back and look at this. That's all there is to it. So I'd like to get a list of the questions, where we're going with this, so maybe that we can address all of it. And then I think as far as the police calls for service, I thought we had that somewhat defined after talking to legal, that it would only be major ones, that we weren't going to have, if your car was broken into, that would not count. And somewhere, I don't know, obviously, if that became clear enough, because we did have an awful lot of discussion about that. And then just another thing, because I'm saying a lot of this for the public too, because I know I'll get emails tomorrow, because it's obvious that this is going to be even more delayed now, because we're going to have to go back and again look at owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied. I think a lot of those things that we felt that we had at least listened to the community on before and brought something forward. So I just want the community to be aware it won't be implemented January 1st. So you don't have to worry about that. It probably will be at least March or April.
Can I ask a very quick point of clarification about a word? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Is that okay? Just with the owner-occupied versus primary residence, owner-occupied, do you mean like there's a human being living, like that's in there while the person's renting it?
That's your primary residence. It's ownership, it's not investor. So I can't own 3 houses. My primary residence is the one that I'm renting out. As it states now, you didn't have to be there for 180 days. So you could rent a whole house or whatever. Now, as it's turning around, everybody wants to make that, at least what I'm understanding, the entire year. So, does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then the other issue is maybe we need to go back and make it clear, because we did have a process whereby you couldn't have the neighbor, the intent was to follow the hotel motel issue, so that we didn't have people calling saying your dog's barking, this is happening, so that there would be a hearing and some discussion. So at this point, I'd like to propose, maybe we have a few more questions, but to clarify what it is that we need to look at, and then go back to the, hopefully not the whole drawing board, but big pieces of it to go ahead and address.
And so certainly, so just for a check-in, it's almost 6:40. So I have the primary residence piece, separate prime and non, something similar to the Wheat Ridge model, striking the 180 days, grandfathering, a parking definition, cleanup defined upon, different areas, calls for service, and some inaccuracies potentially on other pages that might conflict with each other. Enforcement and the lodger's tax, and what does that look like potentially for enforcement if those dollars are always going into lodgers. On-premise resident, home business definition, nuisance calls, a level system, inspections yearly, and sales tax. So I have a lot of lights up. If they're minus questions right now, if there are other things that you want to put on this list, please keep your lights on. And I have Ms. Stewart, Mr. Abel, Ms. Jansen, Oh, Ms. Jansen, your light went off. Up, it's on. Okay, Ms. Franks, Ms. Strom, and Ms. Sherazai. Okay, Mr. Abel, you're still on.
Thank you. There was a mention of having 2 rentals at once, 2 different parties. That spurs other issues that some of our ordinances address, such as smoking. There's only one person renting at a time. It's up to the landlord to decide whether to allow smoking in their house. If there are 2 different renters in there, then that would, it seems to me, trigger the same thing that keeps us from having smoking in hotels and motels. So, one of my concerns, most constant complaint I've heard from other cities is that people in the middle of the night are awakened by ringing doorbell and somebody looking for the temper of the STR. We do have some requirements over lettering and labeling and the size of it. 4-inch lettering, I believe, but I think we need to move whatever that lettering is on to the curb or to the edge of the easement so that people driving down the street can see it better. And that if there are too many complaints from neighbors that they're being awakened at 3 a.m. by folks looking for the STR next door or across the street, I think that should also be noted in calls for service. Because obviously then the signage is not adequate. There were some concerns from on Lakewood Speaks about us not allowing it in multifamily. Is that correct? That we would not allow STRs in multifamily units? So that's been removed. And 180 days seems arbitrary to me as well. I think that about covers it.
Okay. So, and I have Ms. Franks, Ms. Strom, and Ms. Jansen. But just to check in, there's, I think, some concern because people do want to see this go forward and be done. However, these are a lot of changes, and I'm not sure staff has the clarity to really move forward with a drafting of this to go to a first reading without us having another conversation. So I certainly understand everybody's concern on wanting to see this, but this is a lot. And I'm happy to go through and do a quick consensus on what people want to see and what they don't. But the problem is, even if there isn't consensus, these things could come back potentially as an amendment on second reading. And so this speaks maybe to our process in general on sometimes how these things work. And it's certainly not, it's frustrating. So keep that in mind. And Ms. Franks, Ms. Strom. Okay, Ms. Franks, Ms. Strom, do you have anything else you want to add to this list? And then Ms. Stewart, your light was on.
Well, really just wanted to make a couple points. I do think that there's some additional conversations that need to happen. Certainly, I want to look into Wheat Ridge a little bit more. I just wanted to throw a few more things out because I do think there's some individual conversations where maybe we can come up with something that we think is appropriate. But where I have some concerns are if we were to have different requirements for the number of days. Safety is safety for me, so a place being safe, it doesn't matter how many days. If you don't have proper egress in a basement and there were to be a fire, that's a concern whether you're doing it one day or a lot of days. So I think that certainly, but I do think that there is maybe where we don't need to re-inspect. So I think the frequency of that certainly is something that we could look at differently. I think the whole house versus partial house. I have concerns about grandfathering. I think that sort of sends a message that maybe I'm not comfortable sending to my community. And I just wanted to point out the fact that the multiple contracts, the reason why that one came up was because while a street is a shared resource, if you're in some of our neighborhoods where parking is very limited and you have someone with a 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom house with that many contracts, then the resource is being consumed in a way that the community has concerns about. So that doesn't mean we have a right or a wrong answer. I'm just simply saying that these were all the things that we've heard across the 2 years, and I would be happy to have just some individual conversations with folks and just to walk through sort of where we've come and walk through all the things you're hearing, and maybe we can get to a place where we can kind of keep the process moving a little bit more efficiently than going back to committee all the time. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that I'm willing to have some individual conversations and then come back for community conversation, because our community is obviously very interested in seeing this move forward.
Okay. Ms. Strom?
Thank you. For our community, some background, and I know I'll need help with the background, but and admittedly, sitting up here as a new part of this conversation, there's a lot of confusion around owner-occupied versus non-owner-occupied. For the community who is thinking about how we put this into place, there is an easy both, right? But I know that ordinance comes down to, we were originally talking about, is it a home business? Is it an owner-occupied? Do we have a CPA in the basement doing taxes in a house? Or is this not that case? So maybe, Councilor Vincent, you can explain why this owner-occupied versus not, because it's not the same as what we're all thinking when we're talking about two different tiers of putting this rule into place.
Let me make sure I understood the question. Okay. We said we were coming from the perspective, and I'd look at Councilor Franks too if she has some additional information, because we've been on it a long time. You have primary residence, which we said was owner occupied. That's where we started, because there was a push by the community saying we have people knocking on the door, and we have people parking all over the place, and we have pool parties in the back. So then to try to incorporate the idea that you didn't have to be there, that you could be 6 months in Arizona and via your short-term rental, your house, that's where we came up with that. That's where that happened. So we tried to hit a middle ground. You don't have to be there all the time. If you want to rent it out, you can, your whole house as one contract or one room. And then we started getting feedback that the 180 days was too restrictive too. So, but we still wanted to be owner occupied. And that's how we were trying to get around I have a residence in Lakewood, but I really live in Arizona 11 months, and then I'll come back and mow the lawn and do things such as that. So that's where that came up. Does that help?
I think so.
That sounded like maybe not.
Well, it's hard for the community to understand why you can't look at both. Why are we not able to do both?
Do both what?
Having the whole home versus the partial house.
Oh, I think you could if some people are going, they understand. So go ahead, Councilor Shirazari. I was going to say you can rent your whole house if you're going.
Yeah, sorry, to clarify, that's how I'm understanding the Wheat Ridge ordinance, is the limitation is you have basically 2 licenses issued to you, one for your whole house, so you don't have to be on premise because it is your whole home that you're renting out, and one is a partial house. So that secondary rental contract would allow you to rent out part of your home, but both of those exist to you and are available to you. And that's how they've managed to strike that balance, by limiting people outside of the community, because you only have those 2 options available to you, but both options are available to you.
Okay. Seems like we're going to have a more conversation around this with some better definition. Ms. Jansen?
Thank you. So thank you. That really cleared things up for me on that.
especially with the 6 months in Arizona. And that's kind of where I was going. So usually they have a service that comes in and does the cleaning, and when you're talking about employees, that's the employees or the employee, that's what I'm getting at. So that's all good with this, right? Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay. So I certainly sense there's concern about the committee route, but I do know that this is a heavy lift. We do have a workshop format, but the goal is to really take into consideration a consensus of the things that we've talked about to move forward or to drive forward with an ordinance in that regard. And so I'm open to some considerations. Again, now we're about 10 minutes away from 7. We do have folks that have signed up to speak. So I want to make sure that we have that opportunity, and even if we can bring them back over to public comment during our next meeting, which starts at 7, that could be an option as well. Reminding folks that we are cognizant of the 30-some that came in on Lakewood Speaks. So process-wise, in light of trying to move this forward and really address these different things, which I think we have brought forth, what would, I guess, question to staff, would a workshop be prudent to move next, or would it be better for the committee to work within its confines and bring these back?
It's really your prerogative to do it either way, either to go back to the commission and work through some of these issues that were identified and concerns, or to have a workshop, because you do have, because it's, this is taken so long, you have new people who are at different levels of knowledge as it relates to all the work that's been done. So this might be an opportunity for a workshop. So you're all talking to each other and really working through what's been done, what you've heard from the community, make sure all of that is honored and preserved while bringing in the new voices who are also hearing from constituents, so that all of this information comes together. Certainly it's not ready for first and second reading. That would be a marathon, and that would be too tough, I think, for everyone. So certainly you can do it either way. You can send it back to the commission, but then you have representation from about half of this group, or you can do a full workshop. You can do a workshop here. You can do a workshop upstairs in the cabinet room where you're all sitting around the table and really hashing this all out. Just let us know. And as it relates to the timing, it would need to be after the budget, which really is going to consume most of October. So maybe very end of the year or at the beginning of the year as it relates to a delay.
So I appreciate that, and thank you. I think the workshop, because my concern is if we go back to the commission, then we come back and have these same kind of conversations rather than having everybody around the table. I do think, though, in order to be prepared for that workshop, we have to have some sort of consensus on this list. And so I want to see if I can do a consensus check on the things that we've talked about. Primary residence, things related around primary residence is something that either people don't want to see it or they don't want to see it. So I think that to frame it, we need to just be prepared to have that conversation about primary residence in relation to this, the Wheat Ridge model, some of the other things that we've heard about. That needs to be part of the workshop. Am I have a consensus on that piece?
Yes.
Okay, we're clear. Are we cool with that? Okay, thank you. The 180 days, it seems, is our consensus to strike that. Okay, I'm getting a consensus to strike. There's lukewarm, but there's a consensus to strike 180 days. Okay, that's gone. There was the grandfathering in was brought up. Is there a consensus to look at grandfathering? Okay, that's gone. Talking about our parking definition and what that looks like. And also, if the folks that brought these up, if you could maybe get with staff and define more of what you want to see for us to be prepared would be helpful. So talking about parking, that will go forward. The calls for service and the cleanup, is that something that, okay, we'll bring that forward. The conversation about lodger's tax, and so I think this is important probably to make sure that we have a better understanding of how do we fund these things. Is that our consent? Okay, so that'll go forward. On-premise resident, there was a mention of making that in order to have this, somebody needs to be there from the,
I think that was.
okay, so there's not a consensus there.
Go around the ownership, but this circuit's really.
Okay. The home business, making sure that this is part of the home business definition. If I could clarify, so in our zoning code, we do define home businesses and have them as allowed. So the question was, would this then be added to that as a home business?
And there are two categories of home business. Would it be
Yes. Major and small. So I guess the idea would be to make sure that we had a conversation and a legal opinion on, do we need to have that, and what would that look like? Okay. The nuisance calls, it sounds like there was consensus to look at nuisance and that surrounding the two. Level system, do folks want to see the level system as far as licensing for levels? Okay.
I don't want it, but we'll talk about it.
I'm got to get consensus, so, okay. I don't see consensus. The inspections, and is that onerous on the resident and the city? Does we want more information in regards to that? Okay. And I wrote down sales tax, and that was the question regarding platforms collect sales tax. So is there redundancy in having to have a separate sales tax, and maybe just some more information, because I might know the answer to why we have that, but we might need more information on that. Okay. Is there anything else that we missed? Ms. Vincent?
Yes. Just to clarify for the community when we have a workshop, because I think this is the first workshop we've had with all the new people. So what does that mean as far as people being able to input, people listening? Could you clarify that for everybody so we don't have some people who think they're allowed to speak and some who don't? So a little bit more information around that would be great.
So you're right, we haven't done a workshop, especially with this existing council. I don't think we've done a workshop for a very long time, since before the advent of the hybrid meetings. So we would just need to kind of figure out how we would do that. We're kind of breaking new ground here as it relates to a workshop. The one thing with the Zoom platform, we can. I was thinking we won't have all the cameras and the lights like we do down here. The advantage of having a workshop upstairs is it's more informal, and you're sitting around a table and you're really hashing this out together, as opposed to the formal where you're not really looking at each other. If that's what you want to do, we can set it up. We just need a little time to kind of work out how that's going to go.
And to clarify, Lakewood Speaks would be open for, so we would have, we'd certainly have our agenda, we'd have the opportunity for Lakewood Speaks to weigh in again on kind of the things that we have outlined here to move forward. Mr. Olver, then Ms. Franks.
Yeah, I think we missed the jurisdictions or multiple jurisdictions. I mean, right now, the ordinance says that you can only have one place in Lakewood, and I think, well, I suggested that that's okay to have it in another one somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add that? Okay. Looks like there's consensus there. So the multiple jurisdiction ownership. And then Ms. Franks.
I just wanted to kind of maybe help the community see the vision of the workshop. We did that when we did council policies and procedures. And the reason why it's so effective is, let's say Councilor Stewart makes a point. We can then deep dive on that point in real time, investigate. It's a really interactive way to quickly get to some consensus. And how we did that was we, obviously we had the community could do input ahead of time, certainly, and then it was recorded so people who could not attend because the room is a bit smaller had that opportunity to kind of catch up. So I just wanted to kind of say it really was a very productive forum because it really allowed for that real-time collaboration.
Great. Okay. So I want to thank everyone. I want to figure out how to best handle this. So we have public input portion, which will allow anybody who wishes to speak for 3 minutes. For those online, you will hear at 30 seconds, then you'll hear another ding when your time is up. For those who are in chambers, you have a time limit down here in front of you that'll go for 3 minutes. I would just like to remind folks that we do have another meeting following, but because folks have taken the time, if you would like to speak, I'm happy to offer that. I would like to probably stop things around 7:10 to make sure we can move into our next meeting. We do have a ceremony that we're going to be taking place. So I'll start with the folks in chambers. If you wish to speak, please let me know. If you'd like to just contact us again and continue to work with us, that'd be great. So I have Ross Valentine signed up to speak.
No, I'm okay. You answered pretty much all of my
Great.
questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Guy? And then next I have Sandra Stedman and Brent Stedman. Does anybody? And then Kirk McCoy. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Shanna Guy, Ward 1 and 2. I just want to say a few things. I also put comments in Lakewood Speaks. My husband and I have stayed in 15 different short-term rentals in the last 7 years, half of which included our dogs. We've stayed anywhere from just 1 night to 1 month, and the majority being around a week. We only stay at whole home rentals, not shared, and all of those but one were owned and operated by an individual person, not a corporation. We have shopped, gone to attractions and restaurants, used public transportation, and even utilized the local doggy daycare facilities. All of these properties were highly rated, well-maintained, quiet, and safe, and we're not rich. I don't book high-dollar accommodations, only ones we can afford. Airbnb has community standards, including safety and security, identification verification, secure payment options, neighborhood support, party bans, and more, as do most other platforms. Individual hosts add house rules and regulations in addition to these standards. Short-term rentals are utilized by a variety of people: vacationers, remote workers, families visiting family, people attending events and festivals, people waiting for their houses to be constructed or looking into an area just for relocation. There's also traveling medical personnel and business professionals and more. A few of the Airbnb statistics are, at present, over 60% of hosts are women. The average host earns $13,800 annually. Over 60% of hosts in the U.S. say they rent out their primary residence while they are on vacation. 22% of hosts indicate they chose to host after first being an Airbnb guest. And the fastest growing demographic? It's seniors, with over 400,000 Airbnb senior hosts. Hosts do care. Their primary concern is maintaining quality inside and out, quite often having the best-looking property in the neighborhood. Legitimate hosts hold themselves to high standards and receive high reviews and high ratings. Hosts employ local workers such as window cleaners, housekeepers, maintenance and construction workers, lawn and landscape people, to name a few. They give back to their communities in so many ways. We have become a much diversified sharing economy. Don't be afraid of the unknown and embrace the future. Progress with progress. And just a side note, I want to say Arvada PD and all of my law enforcement families out there, my thoughts are with you. Stay strong.
Thank you. Any of those other folks that I mentioned wish to speak on this? Now, this is just for those that may have come in late. This is pertaining to short-term rentals from our study session. Come on down. And if you are online and you wish to speak, please press *9 now. Oh, good evening.
I'm Sandy Stedman.
Oh, hi.
I bought in fall on South Flower Street. I bought in fall of 2018 when there were, it was my understanding, I'm not a legal expert, but I read the code and talked to some people and basically learned that there was no, it wasn't being enforced, basically. Short-term rental laws were not being enforced. So I don't see this as a problem that needs to necessarily be regulated because the incidences of problems have been tiny. But my thought was that, part of the reason we're coming forward with this now as a non-tourist market was because you're smart and you want some tax revenue. And I would have loved to have been licensed and doing it. I rented the upstairs of my house, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. All of 21 made $60,000. Would have loved to have shared that with you. I can't tell you how many guests, and I charged a lot of money. The guests that came in, went shopping, and they buried me in boxes. I became an expert on how to break down boxes. People shop. I charged $350 a night and was booked all year. So, I almost see this as a case of paradise lost because Lakewood's population is not increasing, as I'm sure you all are probably aware. There is an opportunity here. What I'm hoping we can do is, and I guess, let me just, we've all been wrapped around the axle on this whole house versus partial house. I rented the upstairs of my house. I lived in the basement. Okay, so to me, that was an owner-occupied primary residence. So, are we talking about the difference between renting the downstairs as a short-term rental and also me renting my upstairs? Is that what we're talking about? Because the incidence of that's going to be really small. So it's a confusing issue. But to me, having the whole house being rentable only makes sense in the context of being grandfathered. Because if we don't grandfather people that have been doing short-term rentals, whole house makes no sense. Unless, I think there's 180 days. It's a super complicated issue. But what I'm hoping to just say in my last 30 seconds here is that there is an opportunity here to make some money and to not throw the people that currently are doing short-term rentals into hardship, of which I would be one. So count that as 11. And potentially maybe have caps like Town of Breckenridge did and roll out caps and take advantage of the opportunity. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. McCoy, come on down, and then online I have Mr. McCord and Mr. Gomez, it looks like. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and council members. I just want to come and tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Lakewood native, born and raised. My mom lives in Lakewood. My dad lives in Lakewood. They're divorced, separate properties. I have 7 children. My kids are all young. When we travel, we have to use an Airbnb. I cannot put 7 kids in a hotel. We have to have a whole home rental. I can't share it with somebody else, as they would go absolutely crazy living with me and my 7 children for a week. So when we do travel, we're in an Airbnb or a VRBO. That being said, I'm also a full-time Airbnb host. It is my business. I know it's been brought up by many of you about the big bad investors, right? Well, that's me. I'm an investor. I have multiple properties. I currently have 7. I have 2 licenses in Arvada. I have 1 license in Wheat Ridge, and I have a license pending in Grand County. So I'm very happy and willing to follow the regulations, but I'm hoping that you don't put our business out of business. What we do, I have 3 full-time employees. One's a maintenance person, 2 full-time cleaners, as well as myself and my wife who work in the business as well. My kids mow the grass. There's a variety of different things that we do to give back to the community. It was mentioned about shopping. That's a huge draw for the city because our guests do come in and they're spending a significant amount of money while they're here. Most of my properties rent for $600 to $700 a night. They're whole home rentals, very fully remodeled, very nice properties. As it was mentioned, probably the nicer property on the block. So when we go in and we purchased a home and we renovate the property and turn it into a short-term rental, there's obviously concern with the neighbors. Most of the neighbors that have gotten to know us and gotten to know our property have identified that we're one of the better neighbors because they can contact me when there's an issue. When they do have that loud group of guests, they're gone in 3 days. They don't have to worry about, the neighbor that moves in on a 12-month lease and parties every Friday. So there is that concern of it as well. So with that said, I hope that you can understand my position and allow some sort of regulation for us to operate within your guidelines. If that's one property, two properties, that's for you guys to decide. But I do hope that you give us an opportunity to do business with Lakewood.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna, yeah, please. And I would just emphasize, this is not gonna be a last conversation. So, we'll continue to be moving forward in the spirit of time. Could you give us your name and address? Are you signed up?
I did not sign up.
Okay.
But I did put on Lakewood Speaks. I'm Mackenzie Page. I live in Ward 2. I spoke with Sharon as well.
Okay.
I am a real estate agent, and I work with investors a lot, and this big, bad investor that everyone thinks is actually just individual families, like the gentleman we just talked with. I work a lot with millennial generations trying to afford housing, get into their first homes, and so many of my clients utilize Airbnb to supplement their mortgage payments. So this big bad investor thing is just really it's not a thing that I see in Lakewood. We're not Breckenridge for sure. So I just want to say
Great.
thank you, and I appreciate the extended study session.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, Mr. McCord, if you want to give us your name and address or name and ward, we'll get you going 3 minutes. If you wouldn't mind, just making sure we don't have redundancy in the comments. Thank you.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Brian McCord. I'm in Ward 2 on 1283 Benton Street. And many of you know me, at least on the HPC, because I've been involved in this for quite a while now. So I'll try to keep this quick. I made a Lakewood Speaks comment. I'm not going to repeat any of that, really. Just a few things. I want to just say thank you to all of you. There was a lot of thoughtful questions brought up today. A lot of stuff on my mind and other people's mind. And, it's definitely because this is a complex issue, because STRs look like a lot of different things. And so, it is hard to write something to cover that because, there's people who rent an extra room maybe a few weeks a year. And there's people who, like me, I rent a room full time, year long, as part of my income that I really rely on. And, there's people who rent their whole house. I don't do that. I just rent a room. Sometimes I rent 2 rooms, but I'm basically always there. But anyway, it's just complicated. So I just want to acknowledge that and the hard work you all are doing. And I think the workshop is a good idea. I do appreciate you not trying to ram through something, although I know you are probably chomping at the bit to get this done, because this has gone on forever. And I'm sure those of us in the STR community are excited to kind of be done with this as well. But we want it done right. And, STRs, the data shows there may be, it seems they're likely less than 1% of homes in Lakewood currently. So, it's an important topic and it needs to be addressed, but it's not like destroying our city where we just have to stamp it out and just pass something right away. So I just want to say I appreciate the thoughtfulness and taking a little more time on this. And the last thing I just want to add is, as things go forward, especially with implementation, just to consider how that will play out for hosts who are already doing this. The deadlines not rushing us, depending on how many hoops we have to jump through. And also when we get to discussions of fees and whatnot, just, consider again, someone like me who maybe rents full time versus someone who rents a few weeks a year, those fees are going to hit differently. If I'm having to spend $1,000 or $2,000 every year to do inspections and renewals and all that kind of stuff, that's a lot even for me who does it year round. But if you don't, that could just put you out of business. So just keep that in mind. And also, again, a lot of platforms do this for us. Airbnb already collects taxes, so I don't do anything. So I think you do need to address that. But that's all I really got. I'm timing myself here, so that's about 3 minutes. But just thank you again, and I look forward to staying involved with you all. And I'm happy to talk to any council member, because I've done this for 5 years in Lakewood. So I really know the ropes pretty well. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, Mateo Gomez, if you would like to finish us off, and then we'll move on. If you give us your name and address for Ward, we'll start your time.
Hi there, it's Mateo Gomez, and my address is in Ward 3. And I wanted to just say thank you to all the participants for all the comments, and also everybody on your side of things making very hard decisions. So commend you guys on that and say that we greatly appreciate it. I won't repeat too much of my comment, but I've been doing it for 4 years in Lakewood. I operate 3 properties, 2 which I own and 1 for a client of mine that I service. Actually, that 3rd house is in Wheat Ridge. And I would be one of the people that has an I would be considered an investor, but, small scale, where I live in 1 home and the other property is technically an investor property. It was originally bought as my primary, and doing Airbnb, and when I was able to, gave me the edge and the advantage to be able to save and put money towards my second home. So I would hate to see other people that couldn't benefit from the same things that I did. And also, obviously, myself and my housekeepers and my maintenance guy would be greatly affected if you guys limited it to only primary residents. So I hope you guys greatly consider how it would affect me and my employees, and just say thank you guys for all your hard work, and I look forward to seeing what the results are in the future.
Great, thank you. All right, so thank you to everyone, all the participation, and certainly our committee members, staff, for getting us through to this point, and we're going to have something sometime soon to bring forth for Ordinance XX. So we still won't have a number for it yet, but we're getting closer. With that said, before I adjourn, one housekeeping note again to remind folks to, if you're going to attend the regular city council meeting, which we are starting 15 minutes late, you will have to log out. There's a different login. You can go to lakewoodspeaks.org to re-log into that meeting. And with that said, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn. The study session will need about 5 minutes to switch over the platforms. Is that accurate? Okay, so 5 minutes to switch over. We'll come back at 7:20. Thank you.